one of my proudest moments is to work really hard on changing that person and who you are and the way you teach. And I'm proud to say I'm not like that anymore, and I haven't been for a number of years. And see what makes your staff tick and how to get the most out of them has been such a huge change.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Transformation. It's one of the key features of careers in hospitality. How the vision of how you see your career can change with the influences of different kitchens and the lessons learnt too. How different are chefs to the budding young cooks who first pulled on the apron? Clinton Park is the head chef of the Bridge Hotel in Werribee, Victoria. Clinton, how are you going?
I'm good, thanks, Huck. How about yourself?
I'm good. It's good to have you on the show. You've had a turbulent year like everyone, but you've moved states, you've closed businesses, you've changed careers, you've come back into hospitality. It's been a pretty crazy ride. Yeah,
look, it's been a roller coaster to say the least. It's pretty exhausting, but I'm here. I'm happy, and life's pretty good. So pressure makes diamonds, I guess they say.
Well, you opened the Harlequin in Hobart not that long ago. It was still quite a young business, but you ended up closing that. Could you tell us about the challenges of bringing that to its end, but also tell us a bit about it and what you created there? Yeah,
look, to be honest, it's actually still trading. The guys I was in partnership with decided to keep it going. I chose to get out of it. For a number of reasons, COVID being probably the biggest one, really. So Harlequin was, I guess, essentially a pub, and the focus was cooking with fire, and quite heavily meat focused. So we built a lot of all the furniture ourselves. We did a lot of landscaping, like we ripped up part of a car park and laid 650 square meters of lawn ourselves. It was a pretty monster feat. I think it took us a good 12 to probably 16 months worth of manual labor between three of us to sort of get it to where it was. Painting all the walls, the ceilings, building every table and chair out of we repurposed all the furniture that was there. It was all Italian blackwood. So we cut it all up into different shapes and rebuilt everything ourselves from scratch. So there's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of blood, sweat and tears that literally went into that.
And the building historically is quite significant too.
Yeah, look, it is a weird one. It's in this weird old castle in Lenna Valley, which is just north of Hobart CBD. So it started out as a shed to build and service fuel bowsers or petrol pumps. Then transitioned into a doll's house, or a doll museum, where the new owner had bought it and decided that what this shed really needs is a few turrets out the front and to look a lot more like a castle than a shed. So I forget the gentleman's name, but he did that. And then it changed hands again, and the guy who then bought it decided, well, we better continue this castle vibe going, and finished off the rest of the building and put turrets on either side of the crossing of the river, so it looks like it's got a little moat. And so it's a bit strange, it's a bit wacky, but then we took it on. Most recently, before we had it was actually a yum cha restaurant. Yes, bit of history there.
Well, given that you put so much of yourself into that, was it hard to let go of it?
Look, it was. I found it pretty difficult. It was a really tough decision to get out of it. I think part of what made that easier was the fact that as all business relationships go, they're not always set to win or set for success, and they're not always going to be the best partnership. The three of us got along really well, and then obviously opening a restaurant's quite difficult and stressful. And I think along the way there were a few decisions made from both sides which kind of impacted that. And so that relationship wasn't actually going as well as I would have hoped. And then COVID happened, and there was the decision that had to be made with, the financial commitment and responsibility that comes with owning that venue and going to unprecedented times and, the complete unknown of COVID and what that was actually going to mean and represent. How long was it going to go for? What was going to happen? Did we try and go on, and then this is, may have gone on for a lot longer as far as lockdowns and isolations and that are concerned. We're quite fortunate, but there was no foresight or any way to predict the outcome. So I had a chat with, my now wife, my partner at the time, and we spoke about it and thought that it was for the best to sort of get out of it, because we just didn't know what was going to happen, and to try and avoid a serious amount of debt or get putting ourselves in a lot worse position in the future. And look, I shed a few tears, had a little bit of a cry about it, and had a slight existential crisis about everything I've worked so hard for over these years, and the thing I always wanted to do I'd finally done, and now it's gone.
Well, we could talk about your time in Tasmania, because you spent quite a few years at various venues, but you ended up going back to Melbourne in the last year, back to Victoria. What was it like moving states during the last year, and what drove that decision?
Melbourne's home. I mean, I grew up from 16 onwards. I've lived here and worked here. And so like my wife had moved to Tasmania after we'd been together for a little while, and we were doing the interstate thing. Again, it was all quite lucky the way that all worked out. She had moved down the beginning of last year in February for us to set up our lives in Tassie. And she's a nurse. She works at St Vincent's up here, and she had before she moved, and she'd come down and was going to be working at the Royal, and I had the restaurant, and we were like, okay, cool, this is going to be good. We're going to set ourselves up, and we love the Tassie lifestyle, we love the food, we love the nature and how close you are to everything, and we wanted to set ourselves up there. And so she'd made that big move. And then, probably within the first month, COVID started to really hit. And, I think it was March last year, we made that decision for me to get out of the restaurant. And then I was unemployed for a little bit. She was moved down to work in the hospital, and then all that was happening was swabbing. She helped set up and quite fundamental in the establishment of the COVID testing centre in Hobart, and how that moved from in one of the repatriation centres to a complete big outdoor drive-through thing. And I think all of that, plus then, she moved down, and the idea was we can come back and see the family and friends, and I'd always made constant trips to and fro. And then it was kind of that sort of sense of double isolation for us. Not only if we were in Victoria, we wouldn't be able to see anyone because we'd be locked down, but then we were locked down in Tasmania with a body of water surrounding us. You couldn't go anywhere. I wasn't working. She was standing outside in winter as well, swabbing people and in the near snow with a jacket on and freezing. And they worked really hard, and it all sort of just really took a toll. And it was a bit crazy. And then obviously the decision to move back was just kind of one where, we'd spoken about it a lot, and we're like, well, I wasn't working in hospitality for most of last year. I ended up working at Telstra because, it paid me money, and I'm very grateful that I could get full-time employment last year. But then looking to try and get back into the kitchen, again, very limited down there, only more so because of COVID and people holding on to employees or not taking on anyone because no one knew what was going to happen. And, we just spoke about it, and we're like, well, maybe we should move home. Our family's all here, our friends are here, our close support networks are here. There's so many more job opportunities in Melbourne for me. And Ace could always go back to St Vincent's, which she's done. And
Well, as you mentioned, you've called Melbourne home since you were 16. Tell us about when you first got interested in food and that sort of what drew you to a career in hospitality.
Oh, far out. Well, it's far from the classic story of, I spent all my time with mum in the kitchen, or mum or dad was a fabulous cook, and I was just so lucky that I got to learn from them, and it was amazing. Like, it's pretty much the complete opposite. Like, my childhood was a bit of a tough one. My biological mother passed away when I was born, and my grandparents took myself and my sister in, which was in some parts very lucky, and in other parts led to more trauma. We won't need to go too far into all of that, but it was, if you picture a pretty rough, bad childhood or upbringing, that was kind of where I was, and home wasn't a nice place to be. And then, so I basically hit my teenage years, and I was kind of a bit lost as what to do. I did army cadets and everything like that when I was a kid, and I think that sense of organisation, that structure, that strong leadership and everything that was associated with that, for me, drew me in. And then it would come time to look at, work experience in high school, and I was like, I have no fucking clue what I want to do. Maybe I'll join the army because of this. And someone had just said to me, why don't you be a chef? Or why don't you try cooking? And I was like, I've never thought about it. Like, it never really crossed my mind. And they're like, this is over in Esperance in Western Australia. So right on the southeast coast of WA, not close to much, except beautiful beaches and very white sand. But there was a place there called the Taylor Street Tea Rooms, which was like the place in town where everyone would go. So I got in touch with them, and I was like, look, can I do work experience? And they're like, yep, absolutely. And so I went, and I got in, and it just fucking blew me away. I was just like, what is this? What is this world that I've just stepped foot into? It's loud, it's noisy, there's fire everywhere, there's people just, cutting shit fast, and what the hell? Like, it was just like, what is going on? But I just fell in love with it pretty much instantly. And very, very, also strangely enough, one of my best friends to this day, who's also a chef, Daniel Dobra, or Dobbers as he's affectionately known. So we went to high school together. I met him on my first day of my work placement, because he also worked there. And yeah, what's that, 17 or something years ago now, we're still best mates. We call each other family, and we're both chefs and doing all right.
Well, since then, you've worked at some pretty amazing venues in Melbourne and Tasmania. What's been the real key kitchens and moments for you that have triggered your career? I
think there's a few along the way. Going from, very humble beginnings at the Taylor Street Tea Rooms, where there was a toasted sandwich section and poached eggs were done in a poaching tray in a big pot and things like that, to the decision to move to Melbourne when I was 16. I left high school, and cooking gave me a way out and a way to get away from what was home and all that trouble. And I was like, how can I get further away? I need to move somewhere that has some really great restaurants. And it was Sydney or Melbourne. I chose Melbourne. I moved over here and got in touch with some people. There was a restaurant that then opened up in South Yarra called Le Boucherie Parisienne. Dan Swalk was the head chef, and a gentleman called Philippe Aubron was the owner / exec chef, I guess. Very French, very, very French. He was, but very hard to work for, very, very classic, very militant, but I loved it. That was a very big defining moment for me at one point, or at the beginning, where I started my apprenticeship, and it again completely shifted what food was for me, and what showed me what food could be, and just the crazy flavors and combinations of different ingredients, and making all your stocks from scratch, making sausages, cutting up meat, like butchery, terrines, and just really classic technique that I've grown to love over the years and respect so much. But I guess out of the frying pan into the fire, whatever it's called, is just went from one place and then started there, and it was just like I thought I knew or had an idea of food, and I didn't. So I think that was probably number one. And then over the years, I worked for Ricardo Memesso. I worked at SOS, which was a pescatarian restaurant in the city that Paul Mathis had. So he was the chef there. I went there in my second year. And that was a pretty big momentum shift for me, from going from pretty classic French cuisine, stepping into not only Italian, but also pescatarian. It was like, there's no meat in the kitchen. What's going on? Not even for staff tea, it was like a strict ban on it. But learning from this chef who, again, was incredibly hard to work for. He was an absolute hard bastard. But again, I loved it. It's something that just drove me to keep going. Is I just wanted to work for these people and learn what they had to offer. That was a pretty big one as well. Just sort of learning about, hand rolling pasta and cleaning so much fucking fish. But as you know, it's something I did as I was a second year apprentice, where I could confidently say I can definitely clean a fish or two. And then fast forward a few years, I was kind of hit this point where I was in my 20s and I didn't want to be working in really long hours in a restaurant anymore till late. And, I kind of not lost that love or desire to work in fine dining, but I just wanted to see what else there was. And then I went and worked at St. Ali in South Melbourne. Again, that was a pretty key player in my professional growth and myself as a chef, learning to run a massive kitchen team. And then I was the sous chef and Andy Gale was the exec chef, and we didn't really have a head chef for a little bit at South, and then there was St. Ali North, and then there was a pop-up in the city. So I was involved with sort of floating between all three venues and having to learn how to, manage a large number of staff and very busy, very busy venue and high turnover. And there was just that was also pretty key. And I think one of the biggest things that I think brought all this back together for me was one of my good friends, Chris Terlicker, has Blue Bonnet Barbecue. And we met through, as most of us do, just through the industry, and became good friends. And I'd lived pretty close to Blue Bonnet and been in a lot of times. And he just started calling me up sometimes, being like, Grash, I'm hitting the shit. You able to maybe, can you come give me a hand? And so sure enough, it'd be a random night of the week and I'd be literally sitting down to do something, and I'd get the phone to go off and like, Terlicker, I'm like, yeah, mate, how you going? And he'd mumble on. I'd be like, what, do you need me there right now? He'd be like, yeah, no, all right, I'll see you in a minute. And sort of going over and completely like oblivious to exactly what's involved with American barbecue and to do it well. I'd gone over and just rocked up and, be like, all right, mate, what do you fucking need me to do? And I think learning that, and I guess a bit more of the time and the patience and the understanding of the fire, cooking with a live fuel, and the way you can only control it to an extent, but you can't completely control it, and learning how to work with that. And, you can't just twist the knob a little bit to turn it up or down. There's a whole process to it. I think that really brought together a lot of my loves of butchery, meat in general, and cooking with an open flame, or methods around cooking with fire and smoke. So I think those were probably the main key players.
Prior to opening Harlequin, you spent time at Pilgrim in Tasmania, but also the Agrarian Kitchen, which is renowned across Australia. What was it like having that connection to the garden and the local growers and working in the Agrarian?
The Agrarian was a pretty magical experience. It's what took me to Tasmania. It's something that happened again pretty randomly, I guess. I'd followed what Rod and Severin do at the Agrarian. I had their book and everything, and I thought this was pretty amazing. And I was like, if only they opened up a restaurant, you know, the whole approach and ethos that they follow is something I think we can all aspire to if we have the resource and the ability. But even just being a bit more conscious. And I was in Tasmania on a holiday. I was in Franklin, and a lady I used to work with at St. Ali, funny enough, was there working on the floor. And I was like, oh, hey, mate, what's going on? And, you know, we had a quick chat, and she was like, well, my partner's actually, going to be the head chef at the Agrarian Kitchens restaurant. I was like, what? They're opening a restaurant? And she's like, yeah, she'll be here in a minute if you want to have a chat. And I was like, yeah, no worries. So I ended up having a glass of wine and a chat with Ali, who ended up being the head chef at the Agrarian. And I was like, look, here's my email. If that's happening, or maybe let me know, because I'd love to be there. And she sent me an email. I sent through my resume. I flew down for an interview for 24 hours, and went out, checked out the whole Agrarian, met Rod and Severine and the kids. Went and saw the site. And then I went back to Hobart, and I went and ate at Fico when they first, not long after that opened. It was pretty fantastic. One of my favourite restaurants in Australia. And flew back to Melbourne, and I'd got the job, and so I gave my notice, and pretty sure within a month I was in the car and I was on the boat.
Well, you're back in Melbourne now, at the Bridge Hotel in Werribee. Tell us about what you're doing there and what your cooking style is like. So
at the Bridge, it's like a pretty large pub. I think we've got capacity around 300, so it's a monster. What we're doing there is we're trying to offer, high quality pub food, not in the sense of like a gastro pub where we're trying to be leaning to fine dining or anything like that. We just want to do really approachable but flavorful pub food. And it's in volumes, as like large volume as well. So it's not like you can spend too much time on every tiny element of the dish, but we want every component that's there to serve a purpose, have the right flavor, and make sense.
Can you give us a couple of examples of the dishes that you have on the menu that kind of exemplify how you straddle the sort of world of the restaurants that you've worked in and sort of bring that to the pub environment?
Well, I guess one dish that sort of sits in my mind is we just put a beetroot risotto on, with this, as the seasons have all changed and everything like that, and that kind of takes me back to my time at SOS. It was a dish that we sort of like a bit of close to a dish we used to do there. We did a beetroot risotto and just thought of that, and again using that same technique and that approach to doing a good risotto, not just a bowl of wet rice, and being able to produce that again in a high volume establishment that's again approachable for the clientele. And what else are we doing? We're doing a really nice braised lamb shoulder that's served with essentially a semolina gnocchi. So we pan fry the semolina gnocchi. We've got this lovely braised lamb shoulder. It's got that classic component of having your nice brunoise of your veg through it, folded through right at the end. So you've got these lovely colours of these carrots coming out, and this beautiful rich sauce that just coats your mouth, and then you're going to mop it up with these semolina gnocchi.
You mentioned that you moved to Melbourne when you were 16, and the industry really opened your eyes to opportunity and something quite different. How different are you to the 16-year-old back then and the way that you see food and cook?
Chalk and cheese, I reckon. I mean, from when I first moved to Melbourne, I was essentially this little bogan kid from the middle of nowhere on the coast, who thought the epitome of cuisine was the Taylor Street tea rooms with the bloody jetty out the front where people would go and fish. That was food to me, or kind of Wattie's baked beans and toast, which still is the epitome of cuisine, if you ask me. But just completely different person. I'm very grateful and thankful for all my time I've been able to spend in different restaurants as a patron and as a chef. gotten to eat some amazing food. And what it's really, I guess the biggest thing is learning about just tasting everything, trying everything. Don't be scared to try something different and eat a different cuisine or try different food. You know, and you learn to love a lot. Like back then I would barely eat anything. You know, I'd turn my nose up at most things you'd ever put on a plate in front of me. I was really fussy. And now someone's like, "You want some lamb sprains?" I'd be like, "Please, that would be fucking great." Like you got some grabiche or something to go with it. Like just let me have it. Or yeah, just completely different. You know, and as well as a chef, you know, you start out, you work in these places, and the industry's changed a lot, which I'm also grateful for. Because back in the day, you know, it was like screaming, yelling, carrying on, dodging pans. All the abuse, all the underpayment, the long hours and the bullying and all of that. And, you know, you sort of start to become a bit of a product of your environment through coming up in that, and it has to hit a point in your life where you decide to change. And, you know, I'm not ashamed to say it, but I'm not proud of how I was back then when I was, you know, you get that sort of bravado about you and want to be that person. And I think one of my proudest moments is to really step back and assess that and work really hard on changing that person and who you are and the way you teach. And, you know, I'm proud to say I'm not like that anymore, and I haven't been for a number of years. And I'm finding to actually really see what makes your staff tick and how to get the most out of them has been such a huge change.
You mentioned a really troubled childhood that you had growing up, and you also referred to yourself as Gresh just a few moments ago. You haven't always been Clinton Park. You changed your name when you got married to your wife's name. Tell us about that decision and why you did that.
Well, I mean, yeah, so a lot of people call me Gresh. Like my wife calls me Gresham. My original surname was Gresham, or my maiden name, I think that's what it's called, right? So my maiden surname was Gresham. That was how I grew up, and everyone's just called me Gresh for a decade and a half or something like that. But yeah, look, my childhood wasn't great, and I do now, but up until, you know, my wife and our family, I never really had much family. Like I kind of got out of there, got away, and it was kind of just me for years and years and years. And, you know, we were getting married. It came time to sort of talk about these things. And, you know, there's always that age old tradition of, well, you know, the woman takes the man's name. And, you know, I see myself as a feminist. We're a bit of a feminist household, and I don't think that it's anyone's right or need to choose that for anyone else, or I didn't feel like my wife had to do anything. And, you know, she'd float that ear. She's like, well, I'm not really keen on taking your surname because of what that sort of represents for you, and, you know, trauma and hardship, and like it was quite poignant. And so I thought about it a lot, and I was like, you know, well, hopefully we can have kids, and when we do, if we do and if we can, but when we do, what am I passing on to them? And I kind of looked at my surname and I was like, well, it's never done anything for me. I think about it, I'm like, it's not really like this. It doesn't make me think of love and happiness and a welcoming home and good times. It makes me think of quite the opposite. And, you know, the Parks, my family, my beautiful wife, she is the greatest thing to ever happen to me in the whole history of my life, besides walking into a kitchen. They're the two most constant things I've ever had. And I was like, well, her family is the opposite of everything I had. They're loving, they're welcoming. They welcome me with open arms since the first day I ever met them. And they love me, I love them, their family. And so I decided that, you know, I asked if it was okay if I took her name, and she's like, I'd love that. And her father then called me and, you know, welcomed me. He's like, Gresh, look, you've been family since day one. I don't need to welcome you really, but welcome to the family. I'd be so honoured if you took the family name. And he's like, that would be amazing. Make sure you let us know when it's changed so we can have a bottle of champagne to celebrate. And yeah, so look, it wasn't a decision I I took lightly or made lightly, but it was a decision that a lot of it was very easy at the end of the day.
You've had an incredible ability to adapt and change from difficult circumstances and really make an impression with your career as well, and change and adapt for a better life. What sort of advice would you give to people that are looking for change after the trauma of the last year and a half?
Like, although it may seem scary, don't be too scared to try. If you, like, I know it's probably quite cliche, but you never know unless you give it a go. If you don't put yourself out there and really try for something, you're never going to succeed because you've failed because you haven't even started. But then, you have to really attempt it. Or if you want a career change, if you want to move somewhere else, if you want to go for this different job and in a different kitchen or try a different cuisine or anything, just go out and do it. The worst that can happen is you fail at it or it doesn't work out how you want, and we're all still alive, which we're lucky for. You still got your life, you still got your livelihood, you can still try something else.
Well, you're now back in Victoria and with your family and running a really big, successful hotel. What are you loving about the role that you have now and the life that you're living in Victoria?
The team, I think the team that we've got they're all such great people. They've all come from different walks of life, as most of us do in the kitchen. But the team we've got, they're great. They're all such hard workers. Everyone always wants to learn and push themselves and grow. But everyone also just gets along and respects each other. And you can go to work and enjoy yourself every day. But when the going gets tough and everyone's got to sort of dig their heels in a bit and push the fuck on, they're all right there doing it. So, it's massive credit to all of them for how we operate daily as a venue, because we couldn't do it without them. No way. I love the food we're cooking. I think it's been an interesting one, especially being in Werribee. The other 3 venues in the group are all inner city, so their offering is a bit more tailored to their surroundings. And Marquee Lawns in Fitzroy and Union House and the other one. Why do I always forget? There's a complete mental blank there. But they're all Fitzroy, Richmond, and South Yarra and so their clientele is very different to us out here. We're almost regional. And so, what we're doing is tailored to suit them a bit more, and finding that balance. I think probably the most fun comes out of finding where we draw the line with how much we can push what we're doing to be a little bit more creative or a little bit different to what they would normally expect, but then they'll still go for it. And then the lifestyle side of things, it's nice to be able to hop in the car and, within an hour, see my mother and father-in-law. They live up at Mount Macedon, so it's pretty close to us. Or my sister or brother-in-law, or my nieces and nephews, and even just friends. Going to a game of the footy. I hadn't gotten to go to a game at the G in a while, and I went to a game with my brother-in-law the other week when Melbourne played Richmond, and just being able to drive in, park up, walk into the MCG, watch a game of footy, have a beer, and drive home and go to bed. I think that's pretty awesome.
Well, it's been awesome having you on Deep in the Weeds, Clinton. We've loved hearing your story, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing what goes on with the Bridge Hotel moving forward. Please keep in touch, and we'll talk again soon.
Wonderful, mate. Thanks for having me. Hope you have a great day.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.